Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Inner Conquest, the world's greatest modern metaphysics channel. I'm your host, Jacob Edens, and today we are going to be discussing what is everyone is you pushed out. What does that concept mean? How do you operate it? And what is the point in understanding that from a metaphysical lens? So, when you look at things, including the mirror principle or law of assumption, what you're really doing is understanding universal mechanics, which metaphysics is just universal mechanics, right? Because if you can turn a thought into a thing, shouldn't you understand that operative process, right? Because you're thinking all day. So if you can understand that correlation, then you can control essentially your inputs and you can get the outputs more in alignment with what you decide the outputs should be, right? So when you're looking at everyone as you pushed out, you can reference something called the mirror principle, which is essentially the reality around you is a big mirror showing you who you are, your thoughts, your beliefs, and your assumptions. So before you try to control or change too much outside of you, what you want to understand is who am I and what are my assumptions around this situation? So a classic example would be somebody goes, my boss is a a-hole or whatever, right? Now, the boss may present themselves in reality through circumstance to show up in that individual's reality as an a-hole, right? They're literally telling the truth when they tell you this person is this way. Now, what you want to understand though is if you study law of assumption is essentially your assumptions hardened into facts. So the way that you assume a situation to be will manifest itself in alignment with that assumption, right? Somebody goes to the casino, they see themselves as a loser, they assume they're going to lose, they lose every single time. Somebody sees themselves as a winner, they don't put too much importance on it, they just get luckier and luckier and luckier. That's their assumption, right? And you can't fake an assumption, it has to be a real assumption, right? So somebody who's gone to the casino and only won would naturally have an assumption that they always win, and that can play out. And that's why you see people who don't understand metaphysical law operating their life and having success, right? And then you have others who have the negative aspect of that, right? They assume that things are going to get worse and bad for them, so their life matches those assumptions, right? Classic example with the boss is you're in your mind all day, every day in the shower having fake arguments with your boss, telling them off, saying, nah, I get to do this. You don't control me, right? Because you have an assumption that they have power over you. And because of that, you resent them for that, but you're the one who assigned that power valuation by consenting to that relationship, right? So understanding that everyone as you pushed out is essentially everyone reflects your assumption of them. So if you have a negative assumption of somebody, you want to view yourself and see, do I actually have a negative assumption about this person? And then do they match my assumption? Do I expect somebody to show up a certain way? And then when they show up that way, do I go, yep, I'm always proven right? Because that's how you create the reality loop, is through having an assumption. Physical evidence mirrors that assumption, and then you lock it in with saying, yep, that's true. See, I knew that was exactly what it is, because now you're edifying that as a belief structure. A belief is a thought process that you repeat consistently with non-contradictory, non-challenged energy, right? So the difference between belief and knowing, right, is you know something, but when you believe, what you're doing is you're constructing a mental paradigm of repeated thought processes that are non-contradictory. Every time I go on the road, there's bad drivers. Well, that's a perspective truth, right? There's good drivers, there's bad drivers, there's whatever. And to take a back seat and to look into law of attraction, right, you're always on a certain vibratory resonance. And your eyes only see a very, very small percentage of the actual reality, right? You take that into science, you can look at your reticular activating system. It's going to isolate things that you focus on. So if I focus on the color red, I'm going to see red in my environment, whereas before I had focused on that, the red was still in the environment, but I was not aware of it, right? So that's why awareness is such a big thing, because if you can plug in the proper awareness, then you can begin to essentially program your reality like an algorithm to show you what you want it to show you and give you the experiences that you want to give it. That's why metaphysics is so cool, because it puts you back in the driver's seat. So when you understand that everyone is you pushed out, before trying to engage with iterations of people, and by iteration, I just mean aspects of somebody, right? Like to a dude on the street, right? If you're his daughter, he's your dad and he loves you, right? But if you're a dude on the street who's in chronic fear of getting mugged and you see a man, you're like, you know what I mean? He's a scary thing. So what is he? Is he a scary thing or is he a loving father? Well, he's both of those, but you can extrapolate the dimension that you want out of them through your assumption of who that person is. So understanding that personal responsibility puts you back into the driver's seat, if you will, of your interactions with people, places, and circumstances at large. Because understanding these concepts allows you to take accountability for the creations in your reality that you have created through essentially being unconscious while the law has been working through you, right? Because the law of assumption is you, right? You are reality in that way, right? You're fucking here. Right? So like to say you're not involved in the shindig is wrong. So when you are in it, you can either be in it and you can be asleep and the processes are still running, right? And that's what people consider a reactionary type of situation. The processes of manifestation and creation and you as a whole are still operating because reality is still operating on that mirror principle, which is essentially showing you a reflection of you, right? So who do you think you are? What are your assumptions? What are your beliefs? What do you know, right? That is going to be expressed on the screen of space, right? Like if I think I dress sharp every day, I assume the identity of somebody who dresses sharp, right? Like my reticular activating system and my focus is going to put me into a reality where I am able to see fashion trends, I'm made aware of different things that will look good. All of these things will now be brought to me through my individualized magnetism, right? Everybody has that magnetic propensity. And in everybody's reality, they're very much the center of their own reality because think about it. What are you right now? You're at the center of all of your stuff, right? So to deny that is to disorient yourself and to place power on external things when in actuality, the only reason that you can connect with things is because you're on that wavelength, right? So when you don't want to interact with something anymore, instead of being upset that wavelength exists, you change your internal wavelength to your preference, right? You choose. Kings and queens choose, slaves get what they can get, right? So as you understand everyone is you pushed out, what you can do in the same way, right? If you thought someone was scary or bad or whatever, you can change your individualized assumption of them, right? Without controlling or doing anything and just see how they respond to that change in energy and that dynamic, right? And so when you talk about this, a lot of times people say, well, do they have free will? Do you have this, and this? Everybody has free will 100%. But if I walk into a coffee shop and I start firing rounds from a loaded machine gun into the ceiling, are you going to sit there and go, well, he's firing rounds into the ceiling, so should I go and talk to him or should I run away? Let's weigh the pros and cons here because I have free will and I get to choose. So let me do this. No, there's momentum and velocity, right? So if you hold fixed assumptions, people will immediately recognize and clock that assumption and it will vibratorily match you to the aspect of that individual that you are expecting to see, right? So that's why personal responsibility and accountability are at the forefront of understanding metaphysics, which is just hidden physics, where non-hidden physics is drop a ball, gravity picks it up, brings it back down. So you're just understanding now the internal machinations of what you would consider your consciousness, which is just a fancy word for your awareness, which is just the inner workings of you, but you wouldn't have to have an i.e. example awakening process if you weren't in a place that puts you to sleep to begin with, right? That's the whole thing. So you've been doing this process your entire life. Now you're just remembering essentially how it works. You're remembering that your assumptions can harden into facts if you hold them without contradiction. You can lock in different types of people. Oh, you have a bad experience with the boss and then you change that assumption. My boss is awesome. Remember, because we're in a slower key down reality, that reverberative effect won't take place in the now moment externally because the external world has been solidified and crystallized around your previous assumptions. So that's where faith and persistence come into play because now you're reorienting your power diagnosis back to your assumption in wake of the causative effects of the previous assumptions. Because when you put power into the previous causative effects of the previous assumptions, you're essentially putting power into something that doesn't have any power of its own other than the power that you assume it has, right? It's still the law of assumption placing power into structures of your choosing. So that's why it's so pertinent to understand law of assumption, everyone is you pushed out, all these things. So now you can begin to refine your assumptions and consciously choose your assumptions and hold affixations of, I assume I always have more than enough money. I assume I'm super healthy. I assume I'm in my ideal dream physique. I assume I'm, financially free. Whatever you want, you're just one assumption away from that, right? And then you will be contested with the old reality that was crystallized and solidified through your old assumptions. And the way that you get out of that is you just understand what you're doing. You understand that that was an old script that was formed around your assumptions. So no big deal. That's not where the power is, right? Stop wasting time there. You go back to the assumption, use your imagination like an actual thinking person. Oh, I want money. Okay, well, what does that look like? Well, then you start running through mental imagery. You pretend like you're remembering as if that's your new norm now. Best way to think about an assumption is if you've already had it for 2 weeks, and now that you have it, you're thinking of the possibilities that you're going to want to do with it, right? So if you're looking for money, you're like, this is cool. I have all this stuff coming in. Now, what am I doing with it? Or you want this health. Great. Now I'm healthy. Now, what am I doing with it, right? You assume you already have it, and then you think from that assumption as if it's already done, and now you're going on to the next phase. That's what inner conquest is about. You conquer that domain. You want it, you go into that state, you conquer it, you become it, and then from that power position, now you can operate as if your future is now, which puts you automatically into what you would consider a fulfillment reality 100% of the time, which makes life gangbusters, okay? Because now you're not always fucked up from not having what you want. So I know you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave comments for future videos that you would like to see. Additionally, on top of that, the link tree has options for coaching if you'd like to work one-on-one with me. More important than any of that, go conquer, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.